I don't know if you have seen the premiere of the very first episode, but man, if you know, you know, and my god, if this is going to be for the entire series, I think we're gonna have a banger on our hands. But you're probably not here for that, you're here for the other side of Danji, as we've got more dark stage reveals, and let me tell you, Violence Bruce is looking spicy. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another extra edition of Cardfight Update, as we have some more card reveals that are pretty spicy that we need to talk about. As stated in the intro, we've got some more Dark Stage reveals, so let's go over these new Dark Stage cards that are primarily supporting Bruce with the whole Final Rush mechanic. But on top of that, we also see the over trigger for Dark Stage, and it changes everything. Also, one more thing before we dive into the card reveals themselves. If you're interested in these cards, you can see them live in action, as I'm currently live streaming at twitch.tv/MrTimeleap, as I'm playtesting these cards against Philip from the Top Deck Heroes. So if you're curious to see how good these cards are or what type of wacky plays you can do, then definitely go to my Twitch after watching this video, because a lot of crazy things will probably happen later today. So with that said, let's jump straight into these cards, as we've got, to my surprise and my excitement, some new Gear Chronicle cards to talk about. Because we've got this great one, which is Team Detective Uvarti, or Uvarit. And Uvarit has the ability, although when this unit is placed on the rearguard circle, choose one of your other units in the same column as this unit, and it gets power plus 2k until the end of turn. If you are in Final Rush, it gets power plus 5k instead of plus 2k. Now this is actually a pretty nice skill, because it basically becomes a 10k booster as you give the 2k power, so the 2 plus 8 is 10, which can be nice for early aggression. But the main use of this card is during the Violence Bruce Final Rush turn, because if you give the attacker plus 5k power, you get double the value of the 5k, as you can restand a unit, of course, meaning you probably hit for decent numbers, especially if you do this on top of a grade 3. Let's say, for example, the Gear Colossus Time Fissuring Fist grade 3, that then becomes a solid 33k without even persona riding. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. So this grade 1 can increase the overall effectiveness of your actual Final Rush turn. But it doesn't combat the main weakness of the deck, which is the weaker early game, especially your vanilla turn free play. But that can be changed with another grade 1 Gear Chronicle like unit for Dark States. As here we have Protoblock Dragon, and Protoblock Dragon has the ability, auto on rearguard circle, when this unit attacks or boosts, if you are in Final Rush, cost counter plus 1 and put another rearguard into your soul. Choose a card from your soul and put it into your hand. So now you might ask yourself, how does this card help you to increase the early aggression of the deck, as this is once again a Final Rush turn card that only activate or supplement that particular turn in the game? Well, that has to do with how this card functions. This card allows us to basically get cards from our soul into our hand, thus changing our soul now not only for a resource, but it also becomes a toolbox option, meaning we can put cards in our soul back into our hand, which allows us to use multiple cards that have strong on-place effects. But the more important thing is that you first are going to put a rearguard into the soul before you fetch a card, meaning you can actually grab the rearguard you put into the soul directly into your hand. And this is where we come into the situation where we can finally use cards more aggressively in the early game, like the previous grade 1. Because now we can call certain cards that mainly function during the Final Rush turn in the early turn to just push a little bit, and then thanks to this grade 1 we can put them into the soul and back into our hand, so we can play them the following turn when we still are in Final Rush, so we have the max value of those cards, which is actually really good because it allows us to keep turning very powerful turns, turn after turn after turn. But more importantly, we can use this card in many different ways. This card can basically allow us to persona ride every single turn, because we can just keep fetching the grade 3 from our soul back into our hand, and then we can keep riding and doing this over and over and over again, thus securing the persona ride for every single Final Rush turn, which is actually kind of ridiculous if you think about it. But that is mainly using this card as an offensive tool option or as a combo extender. But this card can also be used in a defensive situation, because you might be aware that this card is relatively slow to get your value, because first off, you need to be in Final Rush, which is turn 4, and then you grab a card and get it into your hand, meaning the earliest you can play them is on turn 5, which is relatively slow, but currently games can definitely last that long, so you can get use out of it. But the moment the games go faster and faster and faster, you might immediately want to get value out of your cards the moment you get them into your hand. And this is where we get into the defensive aspect of this card, because this card allows us to get our accidentally soul charge triggers, which can be your over trigger, which is 50k shield, or we can grab the PG. And with the new PG being a 1-card guard in certain situation, this card can effectively secure that we can block at least 1 attack every single turn, because we can either grab the over trigger if we know that 50k shield is more than enough, or we can grab the PG if we know that we can use the PG as a single card guard. And maybe even if you have a huge hand size, you can just use the normal you can just use the PG as a normal way. It doesn't matter in that certain situation. So as we can see, this grade 1 opens up a lot of possibilities, and I think this can be a very good staple card for the clan depending on which direction we go. And so far, it's looking pretty good. But of course, we have also non-Gear Chronicle units for Dark States, as we also have this grade 3 unit, which is Upward Acrobat Marjorie. And Marjorie has the ability Auto Regular Trickle once a turn. When this unit attacks, if you are in Final Rush cost, put one of your other rearguards into the soul, draw a card, soul charge 1, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So where the grade 1 we just talked about is more of a utility option and combo extender and potentially for defensive options, this has the same type of effect, but it then uses it as pure immediate aggression, because you immediately gain power, you immediately gain value, you draw the card, and you soul charge 1. Effectively what this card is a cycle, because you put a unit into the soul, you draw a card, which is a cycle, but on top of that, you soul charge 1 and you gain 10k power. And the interesting part about everything is that it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you counterblast, meaning you can do this basically every single turn. And because the power gain is until the end of turn, meaning both attacks with Violence Bruise will have the increased 10k power, which is pretty nice, as that allows you to be a bit more aggressive. Now, this card is definitely weaker than the Gear Colossus, because that has plus 15k, so this is 5k weaker. But the Gear Colossus needs to be called during the Final Rush turn to gain the full value, and it costs you counterblast. This grade 3 stays on the board and can keep you getting your value if she stays on the board for multiple turns, as it is an on-place effect. And this card can be called in the early game on your first grade 3 turn to push a little bit, because it's not an on-place effect, so you can get more value out of her in the long run. But she doesn't replace the Gear Colossus in my mind. And you might think to yourself, wait, that's a lot of grade 3s that you're going to run then if you're also going to use the Gear Colossus. The reason why I think this is pretty much possible is that I see her more as a grade 2 unit. She's more in line of a better grade 2 that we have. Like, she's better than the right chain grade 2 that just gains 5k power during a Final Rush turn. And she can even allow you to fix your hand, because yes, you run multiple grade 3s at this point, but because she puts any rearguards into the soul and it's effectively a cycle card on a body, you can call the excessive amount of grade 3s onto the field and use this grade 3 to put them into the soul, and then turn those grade 3 from your hand into maybe a trigger unit or more guard, thus allowing you to fix your hand while also building up soul, which you need for your Violence Bruise Soul Blast 5 ability. So there are definitely more interactions that you can use this card than just on first glance. Now we have one more card that we need to talk about, because we have also a new triple R grade 2, which is Diabolos Boys Eden. And Eden has the ability continuous or regular trickle. If you are in Final Rush, this unit gets power plus 5k. And if this unit stands this turn by a card effect, it gets critical plus 1. This is just a good rearguard beater, because it's a solid 15k attacker and it gets an extra critical, meaning your opponent most likely want to guard the second attack, thus taking the first attack, as you probably want to take on a single crit attack instead of a double crit attack for obvious reasons. But that becomes a bit tricky because of its second effect, which is Auto Regular Circle. When this unit attack hits, costs counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. Now this is an effect that Diabolos Bruise needed, or Violence Bruise really needed, because not only does it give the deck some hit pressure and it gives it some field control, and counterblast is not really a resource they use a lot, so that is pretty nice, and it complements his first ability because now they probably don't want to let any of the 2 attacks hit, otherwise they get to retire. But this also gives Bruce a bit more aggressive early game because you can slam this thing on turn 2 or maybe your first grade 3 turn, and you can immediately start swinging with this hit pressure, which can potentially also remove units on your opponent's side of the field, which can be nice, especially during certain matchups. I say, for example, Dragon Empire with their overdressed mechanic. A card like this can really hinder Dragon Empire as they are basically forced to guard this attack every single time. And interesting enough, his second on-hit effect is generic, so you could potentially use this in other decks as well if you want to have that hit pressure. Sadly, you don't gain the power, but if you just want to go for the hit pressure, I mean, we've seen cards in Vanguard in the OG era and in V-Series with just the second effect alone, and they might have been seen play at the time, so I wouldn't be surprised if people will just tag it in just for that. But this isn't everything, because there's one more card for Dark States, which is of course their Overtrigger, which is Hades Dragon Deity of Resentment, Gelmagelt, or Gelmageheld, or Gelmageld, or what the fuck is that supposed to mean? This thing. This is the new Overtrigger, and of course, it has the Overtrigger effect, but that's not the reason why you're here. You want to know what the actual Overtrigger effect is. And that effect is the additional effect you get during your turn. All of your Vanguards get power plus 10k, critical plus 1 until the end of this fight. So, if you drive check this card, and you can only activate this if you drive check it, not damage check, drive check it, your Vanguards will, for the rest of the game, have extra 10k power and extra critical. And this will stay even if you keep rewriting into a different Vanguard. So, the earlier you drive check this card, the more insane it is. If you drive check this on your turn 3 or turn 4, it's pretty strong, as you probably have 1 or more turns after that that gives you potentially the value of this Overtrigger. But if you win second and you attack with your grade 1 and you hit this card, holy crap, is this thing game breaking at that point. Because coming in at that point with the extra 10k power and the extra critical is probably going to win you the game. Unless something weird happens or your opponent is just stomping you the other way around or something that happens. It's very much likely that you're probably going to win the game, as that gives you so much value. Now, the observant people among us have probably realized that this is basically Rising Nova, as you get a Force 1 and a Force 2 marker on your Vanguard circle the moment you drive check it. Which is actually pretty interesting, as it's maybe a homage to the Force marker mechanic, maybe a homage to Rising Nova, especially since that Violence Bruce is a Spike Brothers deck. I don't know, it's an interesting observation. But what's also interesting about this Overtrigger is that this is basically the complete opposite of the other 2 Overtriggers that we've seen so far. The Dragon Empire one that allows you to restand your Vanguard, or the Cray Elemental one, the vanilla one that just gives 2 units 100 million K power, or 100 million power. You want to drive check them as late as possible for those specific turns where they actually matter for the biggest impact. Whereas this order card you want to get it as soon as possible to gain more value over the course of the entire match, which is honestly very interesting design approach they've taken with this order card, and I'm now very curious what the other Overtriggers are going to be. And luckily for us, we don't have to wait for long, because next Tuesday they're going to reveal the remainder 3 Overtriggers. So next Tuesday we're going to see what the Overtrigger for Cato Sanctuary, Stoicheia, and Brandgate is going to do, and I cannot wait. But with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards for Dark States. Are you excited for these cards? I know I'm definitely excited for this. And if you also want to see them in action, you can go to my Twitch account, to twitch.tv/MrTinyleaf, as currently I am live streaming and playtesting these cards with Philip from the Top Deck Heroes. So if you want to see these cards immediately in action, you can go over to twitch.tv/MrTinyleaf. But in the meantime, let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by lovely patrons over patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.